In this lecture, we're going to focus on grammatical structures for describing diagrams. So you can also get diagrams in your writing task 1, academic writing task 1, and how do we describe diagrams. These are slightly different than charts and graphs. So let's start looking at it. Grammatical structures for and describing diagrams. The activities that we're going to look at are labeling a diagram, a language for showing purpose, a multiple choice, language for showing cause and result. We'll do a gap fill activity, and then language for giving extra information. We will learn how to transform the sentences. All right, let's get into our first activity. So in our first activity, you will read the description on the left-hand side of how hydraulic lift works and look at the diagram on the right-hand side. Using words in the bold in the description, label the diagram from A to I. So you have on your diagram the process, right? So you can see a process A, then you've got B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, right? All of these steps in the diagram, you have to, the first one has been done as an example, all right? So it's been given to you. F is the first one that has been given to you. It's lift carriage, right? So think about that. Read the description of how a hydraulic lift works and look at the diagram using the words in bold in the description. Label. So you'll have to label them. Lift carriage is one of them. You have piston, you have tank, you have hydraulic fluid, you have button, you have electronic wires, pump, you have piston housing. All of these words. Try to pause the video here, do this activity on your own, and when you come back, we will review the answers. All right, let's look at the answers here. So number 1, A is control buttons, right? So those are control buttons. B, hydraulic fluid. So by reading this description, you will be able to come up with the answers. C, electric wires. D, fluid tank. E, pump. F, lift carriage. G, piston. H, valve. And I, piston housing. Okay, so you should have gotten these answers after reading the description. Let's look at our second activity. In this activity, we will look at these ways of explaining or expressing the purpose of something. Choose the best way to complete the sentences from 1 to 6. These are some of the expressions or expressions that you can use or phrases that you can use to explain what something does. Now I will give you some structures first. So on the top box or table, you can see the structures. So the first structure is to plus infinitive. This is the grammatical structure that you can use. When a passenger press up control button, to, what does it do to, right? So you have to use to raise the lift. To raise the lift. So you're explaining the function. When you're explaining the function, this is one of the structure that you can use, to plus infinitive, okay? Second structure we've got is so that plus full clause. So you have to use the full clause, so that. And electrical signal is the send, so that it's talking about the result, so that the pump is switched off, okay? Third structure, in order to. In order to is also explaining the result. A signal is sent to a valve in order to shut off the flow of fluid. And then fourth and lastly, so as to plus infinitive, move fluid from the tank into the bottom of the piston housing, so as to force the piston up. You have to use infinitive in this case. So always remember with these structures, you have to remember with to, always use infinitive. So that, full clause, all right? So that the pump is switched off, this is a clause. In order to, again, you have to here, so you can remember, okay, in order to, then you will use infinitive. With to, always use infinitive. And so as to, always use infinitive. You can't use a past simple, for example. You can't say in order to Shut is obviously shut, but let's say force. So you can't say so as to force the piston. You have to use infinitive, which is base form of the word. All right. So I want you to do this activity on your own. You have multiple choice questions. The water is boiled. Which phrase are you going to use? In order to, or so as to, or to? Which one are you going to use? So pause the video here, do this exercise on your own, and when you come back, we will review the answers. All right, let's review the answers. So we've got number one is C. The water is boiled to kill harmful germs. Number two, scales are used so that, it's talking about the result, so that the ingredients are weighted accurately. Number three, there is a battery to provide electric power, right? Number four, grow straight, the plant needs to be supported with a piece of wood. What are you going to use? You're going to use A, in order to. In order to grow straight, the plant needs to be supported with a piece of wood. 5, the leaves need to be left in the sun. What is the answer here? C, so as to dry thoroughly. Number 6, the frame is made of aluminum. B is the correct answer, so that the structure is light but strong. Okay, so I hope you got the answers correct. Let's move on to our next activity. All right, in this activity, what we're going to do is I will give you a few more phrases to use, right, to explain a diagram, right? Complete this description of the process by using words and phrases below. So you've got as a result of, and these are some of the things that we learn in our speaking section as well. These are the connecting words, the linking words, right? You must remember these: because, due, causes. Some of them talks about result, some of them talks about reason, right? Some of them talks about contrast here. So think about, which one you would use and which will fit grammatically accurately here. So do this exercise on your own, and when you come back, we will review the answers. All right, let's look at the answers now. So I'm going to read the whole article and then we'll find out the answers. Water leaks slowly into the cave because there are thousands of tiny cracks and holes in the limestone rock. On its way down, the water absorbs the calcium carbonate present in the rock, and this results in a mineral solution. Small drops of this solution form on the roof of the cave. When each drop falls, it leaves behind a ring-shaped deposit of calcite. This process is repeated many times, and as a result, or you could use consequently, a thin calcite tube is formed. This tube is sometimes called a soda straw on account of its shape. Occasionally, the soda straw gets blocked due to a piece of stone or soil. This causes the drops of solution to pour down the outside of the straw. Consequently, as a result of, you can use both, calcite deposits build up around the straw, and these give rise to the typical cone shape of the stalactite. Only the straws that get blocked will eventually become stalactites. All right, let's move on to the next activity. So in this activity, what I want you to do is think about extra information clause. So we're really going to learn the relative clauses. Then what are relative clauses? Relative clauses are clauses in sentences which add extra information, right? Which add information about subject of the sentence. So you have a subject and you want to say something about the subject, a person, who is the relative clause, right? Sometimes this extra information and the sentence would be correct without the clause. So why it's correct without the clause? In this case, we use the clause that clause now is non-defining. So sometimes you can use that clause, it will make sense, but sometimes, in other words, it will not make sense of it. If it doesn't make sense of it, that's the defining relative clause. If it makes sense without it, it's just an extra information, non-essential information, then that means it's non-defining. And there are some rules when you're talking about, when you're using non-defining and defining. Okay, so let's just talk about these. Which ones are defining, which ones are non-defining? Let's look at some examples, right? Let's look at this example from the description of the lift in activity 1. The lift carriage is also forced. If you wanted to define this, if you wanted to say the lift carriage is also forced, you could say the lift carriage which is attached to the top of the piston is also forced. Is it defining or non-defining? Is this information essential or non-essential? Let's just find out. This clause adds extra information about the carriage, but the sentence is grammatical without the clause. It's grammatically correct. If you didn't add that which is attached to the top of the piston, that's grammatically correct, right? But in your writing, when you're writing the response, you should use the relative clause, but you should know if you're using a non-defining clause, which is, if you removed it, does it make sense still grammatically? If you wanted to add that, how would you add that? All right, so it's very important that if you're writing a non-defining clause like this one here, which is attached to the bottom of the piston, notice that we use commas in the start of the clause. So you can use this lift carriage, then comma, and then you would use which is attached to the top of the piston. Okay, so you'll have to use it like that. To separate a non-defining clause from the main clause, for defining clause, you don't need the comma. So you always remember that. Also, remember that you cannot use that as a relative pronoun, that noun defining with non-defining clause. So for example, here we can't say that is attached to the bottom of piston is also forced. You can't use that in non-defining clause, okay? You can use any other pronoun, which, who, where, relative pronoun, but you can't use that for non-defining clause. If it's non-essential information, do not use that. It's grammatically incorrect and you will lose marks here. All right, let's talk about the other things. So other clauses add important information which describe or define the subject of the sentence. For example, this one, when I was talking about the defining clause, let's look at an example of that. Only the straws that get blocked, so here I'm using that and I'm not using any comma here. You can see the difference. Only the straws that get blocked will eventually become stalactites, right? So if you think about this one, I can't really say the sentence without that get blocked because it will not be grammatically correct. Only the straws will eventually become stalactites. That information is very important. So without that information, it might be grammatically correct, but it's not logically correct. So it's very important for me to include that information to be able to explain what straws I'm talking about. Okay, so that's why you could see the difference. There is no comma here, and I'm able to use that in this situation, right? So this time the sentence would not make sense without the relative clause. There is no comma or to separate the clause, and we can use that where, who, which, etc. as a relative clause. Okay, so just remember, for non-essential information when you're writing a relative clause in the middle to add extra information, just don't use that. Okay, for definings you can use that. Connect the information. So let's do this activity. Connect the information to make sentences with relative clauses, non-defining or defining, right? For example, there is a light. It turns on when the temperature rises. How would you change that? In this case, is it defining or non-defining? There is a light which turns on when the temperature rises. Right, so when I'm using which, there is a light turns on when the temperature rises. It will not make sense. I have to use which in the middle, and that is the defining clauses. I'm defining defining pronoun. That's defining the light. Which light am I talking about? All right, so pause the video here. Do this exercise on your own. Try to make relative clauses here on your own, and when you come back, we will review the answers. All right, let's look at the answers. So in this one, number one, a container, it's made of steel, it catches the rainwater. A container which is made of steel catches the rainwater, right? Number two, chlorine is added to the tank, it kills any dangerous bacteria. Chlorine, which kills any dangerous bacteria, is added to the tank. Number three, the pages pass through a machine, it cuts off the edges. The pages pass through a machine that cuts off the edges. That we're using that here is a definitive clause, of course. And we can use that, and you can see there's no comma there as well, so that's an indication there. The program. So the program takes 6 months. It's done in India. The programming takes 6 months. It's done in India. The programming which takes 6 months is done in India, or the programming which is done in India takes 6 months. Logically, the both sentences can be used, and they both mean the same thing. So as long as the meaning doesn't change, you can use in either way. You can change the order of the relative clauses. Okay. Number five, the mixture is heated to a temperature. The temperature causes a chemical reaction. The mixture is heated to a temperature which causes a chemical reaction. All right, so please use this relative clause. Is very important, especially in your written English form. When you're writing extra information, just remember that when you're writing non-defining, non-essential information, then you cannot use that, and you should use comma. There is a special structure for grammar for non-defining information, for non-essential information. If it's defining relative clause, then you don't have to use a comma, and you can use that to talk about other things. And also remember, for relative pronouns, who is used for person, where is used for place, which is used for things, that is also used for things. You could also use that for person as well. So there are special cases for that. Be careful there. And you can use when for explaining time. Okay, so always remember what are these relative pronouns defining. Okay, so let's just talk about quickly the grammatical range and accuracy. I have put the link in my previous videos about band descriptors, and I think you should read them in detail. But let's just review these ones for grammatical range and accuracy. This is also covered very deeply. So let's just talk about this. And you will get band 5 if the range of your structures is limited and rather repetitive. So if you're using same structure all the time, repeating the same structure, you will achieve about 5 bands for grammatical range and accuracy. Although complex structures are attempted, you're using the complex structures, not the simple structures. They tend to be faulty, so they're not grammatically correct, and the greatest accuracy is achieved on a simple sentence. So you're only achieving the accuracy on the simple sentences. When you're writing complex sentences, you're making mistakes. Grammatical errors may be frequent and cause some difficulty for the reader, and punctuation may be faulty. Very important that you use the punctuation, and that's why we talked about in the relative clauses where to use a comma and where not to use a comma. Talking about band 6, you can achieve band 6 in grammatical range and accuracy when a mix of simple and complex structures forms is used, but flexibility is limited. There is no flexibility there, but you have used complex sentences. Examples of more complex structures are not marked by the same level of accuracy as in the simple structures. Simple structures are much more accurate than the complex structure. Errors in grammar and punctuation occur, but rarely impede the communication. So as long as people are able to understand you, it's grammatically wrong, but still, it's not impeding the communication, you can still get those marks, that band. Band 7, a variety of complex structures is used with some flexibility and accuracy. Grammar and punctuation are generally well controlled, and error-free sentences are frequent. Okay, so in this case, your sentences are error-free, they're frequently error-free, and a few errors in grammar may persist, but these do not impede the communication skills. So that's when you can score band 7. And let's just look at band 8. A wide range of structures within the scope of the task is flexibly used. For example, we talked about the structure with the verb plus adverb. We talked about adjective and noun structure. We talked about active structure, passive structure. If you're using a variety of those, you can actually achieve band 8. The majority of sentences are error-free, and the punctuations is well managed. Punctuations are well managed. Very important that you use good punctuation. You should know where to use them. Occasional non-systematic errors and inappropriacies occur, but have minimal impact on the communication. So that's when you can score band 8. Right, that's all I had for this lecture. And I will see you in the part 2 of writing test, which is going to be writing essays. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.